Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything: geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to you live from New York City, your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Porkins Policy Radio. As always, I am your host, Pierce Redmond, and you can find this show here at American Freedom Radio, AmericanFreedomRadio.com, as well as on my website, which is PorkinsPolicyReview.com. And if you are new to the show, there are lots of ways to listen. Of course, you can sign up for email updates. You can I'm on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, FM Player, a whole bunch of other podcatchers. So definitely lots of ways to listen that way. I, of course, am rebroadcast later Friday nights on a host of other stations, including Awake and People's Internet Radio and PSN. And you can tune in to those shows from, I believe it's 10 to midnight. And, of course, on Saturdays on KYAH 540 AM out in Utah, I am replayed from 6 to 8 Mountain Time. But I don't really want to take up any more time blathering on about the ways you can listen to me. I think everyone knows, and I'll mention some more in the second hour, because I'm very excited to get into this first hour topic with my guest, good friend of the show, Keelan Balderson. Keelan is, of course, a filmmaker and journalist based in the UK. You can find all of his work at wideshut.co.uk. And Keelan has been on the show several times before, mostly to discuss the recent spat of terrorist attacks. We talked about the Manchester bombing and the Parsons Green attack. But Keelan is joining us today to discuss the Tommy Robinson fiasco. I guess before we dive right into that, Keelan, how are you doing?
Hey, Pierce. Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me back on.
Absolutely. Well, I was just totally ignorant of the Tommy Robinson thing. When I awoke one morning to see him trending on Twitter and all over the place, and I was actually, of course, your initial reaction is like he must be dead or something, And I was also just shocked that people were even talking about him because I thought he had just sort of faded into obscurity in my own mind. Like I hadn't thought of the EDL, the English Defense League, in years. I hadn't thought of Tommy Robinson. I knew that he worked for the rebel media, but I had no concept that he was actually someone that people cared about. And I didn't really look into this, that he was charged with contempt of court, in part because I just sort of assumed, he probably did break whatever it was. I didn't really care to look all that closely into it because he really is just like this meaningless figure. But, it became sort of more and more intense, and people were saying that this was like the most heinous crime ever committed, and this was like the real first step towards the evil leftist Muslims taking over, and then I was just sort of like go on checking out all the sites that I follow, and I read an article on your site actually detailing this, and we'll link up to that, and we'll also link up to an excellent episode of the Wide Shut webcast that you did that's like an hour long, and we'll probably get into more detail than we can today, chronicling all of this. And then I actually kind of did become interested in this. But Keelan, give us just because you lay out the legal justification for why Tommy Robinson was arrested, why he did actually commit the crime of, contempt of court, and why he went to jail. And I don't want to spend too much time chronicling all of that because, again, you lay it out, and while people might, nitpick it, I mean, there's really nothing to nitpick. I mean, I think it's people that don't understand how UK law works. But very briefly, Keelan, kind of give us a thumbnail sketch for what happened, what caused Tommy Robinson to initially have this sort of charge hanging over his head. This dates back to I think it's like a year ago or so. And then what happened more recently that actually caused him to plead guilty, and he's now facing like a little over a year in jail. So just give us a thumbnail sketch.
Yeah, so there's a couple of layers to this, because Tommy broke sort of a court-ordered reporting restriction that isn't always applied to trials. And I'll get to that, but basically he broke a pretty standard law in this country called contempt of court, and it's basically to prevent juries from being influenced by the media after an arrest and during a trial. So it applies as soon as someone's been arrested. So it's to allow the accused to have a fair trial based on the evidence that's presented in court. And in a roundabout way, what Tommy Robinson did is turned up at this court. He accosted the defendants, stuck a camera in their face, started asking them about verdicts, certain phrases that he used that implied that they were guilty before a jury had found them guilty. Under UK law, you can't do that. You can't assassinate the character of someone. You can't bring up past dirt about them, past convictions. You can't interview witnesses that saw the crime because that may or may not be used in the court. All that kind of stuff. And he was basically picked up on that. And he already had a suspended sentence for a similar thing. So about a year ago in Canterbury, he went there to confront some defendants in a similar grooming gang case. He was calling them, Muslim pedophiles, all this kind of thing, before they were proven to be that in the court of law. And he also went into the court with his camera, filming around, which is also an element of contempt of court. You're not allowed to film anywhere on a court precinct. So that includes inside the buildings, outside the buildings, in cafes that are part of the court. You just can't do that. So he had that over his head, a suspended sentence, and he basically just repeated a similar kind of actions. And you can maybe oppose this law, maybe you don't agree with the system and how it works, but practically speaking, he put trials at risk. So, campaign against the law, but don't stick your head in the sand, because the defense of these people who are up in the trial could have literally said, look, he's jeopardizing this trial, and it could have been thrown out. They might have had to get a new jury, so that's kind of how it works. Well,
and yeah, to be clear, I think that's the biggest issue with this, aside from the free speech and his journalistic integrity or whatever. And again, we're really pushing the envelope by calling Tommy Robinson a journalist. I mean, he's an activist that live streams videos, but he doesn't do any journalism. As you pointed out in both your articles and in your podcast, a lot, mostly what Tommy Robinson does is read mainstream articles, and some of them which are so old that they're actually factually inaccurate, and then he just sort of repeats them. And again, he, in this video, I mean, he goes up to some of these defendants, starts yelling at them, they start yelling at him, and then, Robinson says, well, they don't look like they're remorseful about their actions. Well, again, it is innocent until proven guilty. So that is also kind of, libelous and contempt. But as you point out, Keelan, the big thing here is that this is a gift, or could have been a gift, to these men who are accused of some really, horrific, abhorrent, heinous crimes. They could easily say, well, this is it. Anyone could have been watching that live stream and seen this, and the case could be thrown out. So the thing that Tommy Robinson is claiming to, he's trying to help these poor white girls from a lower class area seek justice, and the media is the one that is censoring all of this stuff. I mean, he could have sabotaged this case just right then and there, correct?
Yeah, like I want to point people to a chap called Nasir Afzal. He's a former prosecutor, and he explained this on Twitter. And he's been involved in these kinds of grooming cases before, and I think he's left the legal profession now, and he actually campaigns around this issue. But he explained during the Rochdale case, which was a pretty famous case over here, because there were so many of these Tommy Robinsons, these sort of careless activists, who he describes as the far right, posting all this stuff on social media, with no idea about how the court systems work. The defense in that case petitioned the judge and said, look, the far right have prejudiced this case. There's no way these men can have a fair trial now because this has been spread so far. And we want this case thrown out. And the prosecution had to fight a pretty hard battle to let this carry on, because of these anti-Islam activists or whatever you want to call them, prejudicing the case. So like I said, look, you might not agree with the law, fine, protest against the law or petition your MPs or something, but the reality is these trials are at risk because of people like Tommy Robinson. And just from a practical, logical position, if you want justice within the reality of the system that we have, then Tommy Robinson isn't helping. Look, name one. No one can do this. I've challenged people because obviously a lot of people are blowing up my notifications.
Oh yeah. The comments on your most recent video, it's almost entirely people supporting Tommy Robinson and attacking you without actually even listening to what you're saying. But go on.
Yeah, like I challenge them. Look, name one of these child grooming gangs that Tommy Robinson has actually uncovered. It's framed like, oh, the media won't touch this, and only brave Tommy Robinson is the one covering this. No, Andrew Norfolk of the Times first wrote about this in 2003 when Robinson was still, like a football hooligan getting charged for assaulting police officers and stuff. Andrew Norfolk stayed loyal to perhaps the most infamous case, the Rotherham case that blew all this wide open. He stayed loyal to that for over a decade, going through all the right channels, carefully interviewing the families, following it through the courts, getting all the documentation and police files, doing all the hard legwork. And people, they throw out these George Orwell cliches, like, this is George Orwell's nightmare come true, free speech is dead, all this stuff. Andrew Norfolk won the Orwell Prize for Journalism for exposing the grooming gangs. And Tommy Robinson's the hero. All he does is literally find out a new story in the mainstream media and then goes out and shouts about it on the street and in front of the courts and shouts about it on social media. And then he claims, the mainstream media aren't covering this. He was like, one of his defenses is that, I was just reading something from the newspaper. Well, I thought the media weren't covering it. Like, it's such a contradiction.
No, yeah, I was going to say that Andrew Norfolk, who I didn't really know until I really kind of started following your stuff on all of this, Keelan. But yeah, as you said, did tremendous work. Also, I'll just point out James Sr., who ran a youth outreach program called Risky Business, which is connected to the Rotherham child sex ring, basically. She did a lot of this stuff. I think she got some huge, an MBE, which is a huge award that it's like the highest honor, right? A civilian can receive in the UK. For her work. There was also Adele Weir and Dr. Angie Heal, who both produced reports that exposed a lot of this stuff that were covered up. And I guess we should just note, because I think most of my listeners may be in the dark about this, and I certainly was as well. But there is, the Rotherham and the Rochdale child sex abuse rings. It is real. These were child grooming, sexual abuse rings from within a section of the British Pakistani community that, mainly centered in the north of England. And they were abusing thousands and thousands of mostly, but not exclusively, white girls. You know, there are also tons of Pakistani girls that went completely unreported because, again, they use this sort of their warped, Muslim ideology to shame these girls into never speaking out. And the local police and local city council government, they were covering this up or certainly ignoring this problem. I mean, that is true, correct, Keelan? Oh, yeah, there was definitely an issue. And it's been, at least since the 80s, which is kind of when this started to filter out slowly. And there's been all sorts of, like, official reports and sort of sociological studies into it. And like I say, you brought up a few people there. Andrew Norfolk, there was another lady, I can't remember the newspaper she worked for, but there's a lot of hardworking people that did expose all this, for then Tommy Robinson and co to sort of jump on it and I sort of use it for their agenda. And there is an argument. Look, this issue is not exclusive to Muslims. There's an issue within the Muslim community, and there's kind of a unique background to perhaps how they justify their actions within that community. But there's also the Catholic Church. There recently. Well, you know what I thought? Sorry to interrupt, but the MI5 trafficking of boys in Northern Ireland. I mean, they were covering this. It's not exclusive to this one thing. I mean, the Catholic Church is a huge one. Right, and we've also just only recently come to grips with the full scale of something called the Chichester scandal, which was a Church of England grooming scandal. And there's also, I know how, who was the guy in the, is it Jerry Sandusky, the guy in the States that, sure, the sort of football thing? Yeah. Yeah, we've got sadly, our own thing within soccer now, which is just kind of all coming to light, how young soccer players were being abused by coaches and stuff like that. Jimmy Savile. Well, yeah, exactly, that as well. And ironically, one of the founding members of the English Defence League, a chap called Richard Price, was convicted of child porn in 2011, and Tommy Robinson actually defended him initially. So, he couldn't even expose people within his own organisation. Yeah, there's been a few people within the EDL that have been convicted of this kind of stuff too. Not on the scale of kind of like grooming gangs, but sort of isolated cases. And Tommy didn't seem to be able to see this in his own mates, his own peers, in his own organisation. So, yeah, interesting, isn't it? And you point that out, Keelan, that there is, like we're saying, I mean, there is an issue, and I think you're correct in elaborating on that too. That this issue is more wide, and I mean it's the same thing here in the U.S. I mean, it's coming out more and more in drips and drabs. The level. I mean, we were talking about like what's going on in Hollywood. Clearly, the Catholic Church. Perhaps even our sitting president, influence others. And it's like a wider issue. But again, as you say, the Tommy Robinson, these morons that run like rebel media, cult leaders like Stefan Molyneux and others are seizing upon this. Initially, I would for money. I mean, that's even more disgusting. I mean, it is about, when you come down to it, especially the way that, online media works, it is about the clicks. And this generates clicks like you wouldn't believe. I think there's different levels to that, in terms of like awareness. I mean, I get it. Look, I'm much closer to perhaps the American kind of concept of free speech than I am of what we have over here in the UK. I mean, I have some sympathy for some of these figures that are propped up in the sort of, I don't know what you call it, the new right, people like Count Dankula and that whole Nazi dog thing. And I get this whole backlash against the rise of like social justice warriors and the no platforming and calling everyone Nazis. I get that. And I get that
there's a lot of YouTubers in that space that I have some time for, but when you get up to the level of Fox News and Breitbart and, like you say, Rebel Media, who Tommy worked for, and people like Stephen Molyneux, who's clearly a very educated man, you know that they're being disingenuous and they're just seizing on this false narrative. They're being willfully ignorant about it because, you know, who doesn't love a free speech story? Who doesn't love a good story about a political prisoner? And the problem is, I think that echo chamber that is, it's fairly recent, I think, in just the last few years, how it's kind of unified. And this echo chamber has elevated Tommy Robinson to this position that even just a couple of years ago, no one would really have imagined. But I think because of the rise of that sort of YouTube echo chamber, that's now occurred. And I don't think everyone involved in it are sort of aware of the finer workings of the UK courts and stuff. But yeah, you get these big kind of powerful media outlets like Breitbart and Fox News and even Rebel Media that definitely should know better. You know, Breitbart put out this stupid article where it was like redacted, and it just, you know, it went viral because there was a gag or a D notice. Like, no, it's not a D notice. It's not a national security thing. But they're journalists. They have offices in London. They understand contempt law, but they've decided to use it to ignore that and use it as sort of political ammo, I think.
Oh, I was going to say that this is something, you know, listening to you explain this, and we should also just, you know, for the listeners out there, you literally just took a law course in all of this, right, Keelan? I mean, you right, actually, you do know what you're talking about. You had to pass a law course for your journalism degree. So you know what you're talking about. And it's so many people in the U.S. and Canada that they don't understand UK law at all, and I'm ignorant of it. And there are certainly things that, like, I have trouble understanding, you know, how some of these things are contempt or what, but that's UK law. You know, I mean, if you don't like it, then like you said, you can campaign against it. But he broke the law. You know what I mean? It's sort of like, we can have these philosophical conversations about how free speech should be this and that and the other thing, but we also live in reality, hopefully. And this is, you know, like you said, I mean, in the reality of the court system, you have to do this sort of stuff, or you're going to have these cases being thrown out. And like I've seen these people saying, like, oh, it's, you know, instead of just sequestering the jury, they're sequestering the entire nation by not allowing them to report on things. And okay, yes, some of these reporting restrictions seem a little draconian. But two things. One, they don't always sequester juries. Okay, like, people have this concept that, like, in cases you're immediately sequestered. I mean, this is nowhere near on the level of these, like, grooming cases, but you know, I know my dad was on a jury of and it was a rape case, and it was certainly being talked about in the local news, but he was instructed, do not read the local news, so he didn't, you know,
right,
and he served on the trial. I mean, that's how most of these things work.
Yeah, I should probably clarify just this little bit about it, because it's not that journalists can't report on these cases. There were journalists in the court reporting on this case, but there's something called a postponement order, which means the stories that they're writing can't be published until all the trials. There's three. Okay, so there's a huge amount of defendants in this case, so you can't physically try all of them at once, right? That just wouldn't make sense. Like, if you're a juror, you wouldn't be able to just deal with that. So there's three trials, and there's a postponement order until all those trials are over. Because say the first trial concludes and the journalists put out their story, so they talk about what the prosecution says, what the defense said, the verdicts, so-and-so's guilty, so-and-so's innocent. They can't report all that because the second trial hinges on some of that same evidence. The second trial, the jurors would be like, well, if Bob or Mohammed's guilty in this trial, then maybe his friend, whoever, is guilty in this trial. So it's postponed. It's not that there's a gag order and they're not going to report on Muslim grooming gangs. It's just the nature of that many people that they have to postpone it. And eventually it will be reported on. And it was reported on until the Crown Court trial. So, yeah, it's just kind of a false narrative that's been put out there.
Right, and again, you might have an issue with that. Fine. Okay, but it, like you said, to equate that with like Tommy Robinson is being censored by the British deep state to cover up the fact that they are inviting Muslim rape gangs into Britain to corrupt and destroy young white girls. I mean, it is just like you said, when people like Stefan Molyneux and others are spouting that, they know exactly that. They know they're wrong. They know that they are stirring the pot in order to enrich their own lives and to push a certain agenda, real or imagined.
Right.
No, go ahead, Keelan.
Yeah, and these are the quote, facts before feelings people,
Right.
These are the people that accuse the left of virtue signaling. But isn't that basically what Tommy Robinson's doing? He's virtue signaling over child abuse. Look how good I am. I'm exposing grooming gangs. How dare you challenge the narrative? I'm so virtuous. That's virtue signaling. It's the same thing but flipped around.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're just a classic example because the left does this all the time. They're incapable of seeing their own hypocrisy, and the right is the exact same way when it comes to something like this. And again, too, it's like there are all sorts of other groups out there that are actually doing real work combating this or trying to understand this. Whereas, what is Tommy Robinson or Rebel Media or Laura Southern or any of the, what's their actual response? It's like, get rid of Muslims, basically. It's not like understanding how undue influence works or how, why do men do this? How do we help children build defenses in order to not be preyed upon by individuals like this? Or why aren't they talking about, reforming the police departments in these local areas? It's basically just like get rid of the Muslims and then there will be no more sexual assaults against children if there's no Muslims. Even though, as you said, Church of England, the Catholic Church, Jimmy Savile wasn't a Muslim.
Right.
Come on, guys. But Keelan, there's also another level to this story that I really wanted to get into with you, and you kind of again you like tweeted me like this morning that this you'd suddenly remembered all this, but Tommy Robinson, what is Tommy Robinson's real name for everybody out there?
Good question, really. I think it's Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, but right. He's also gone by Aaron Lennon. He tried to get into the U.S. on a false passport, I think, by someone called Paul Harris. So he's got so many names, and a lot of his associates have multiple names. It's a very weird. But then again, he was convicted of fraud as well, so maybe that's, I don't know, but yeah. So
right, Stephen Christopher Yaxley-Lennon, a.k.a. Tommy Robinson, a.k.a. Andrew McMaster, a.k.a. Paul Harris. And that is like, it's not like he changed. I've read places that like his mother's, when his mother remarried, that guy, his name was Robinson and Tommy took that name, but that is not correct because, in the actual court proceedings, he is referred to as Stephen Lennon. So it's not like
Lennon was that guy's name, so he had a different name.
Okay.
But
great.
Tommy
right. Anyway,
his version of how it became Tommy Robinson was a famous football hooligan, and he sort of adopted that, not to not because he liked this Tommy Robinson guy, but apparently this Tommy Robinson guy had a feud with his uncle, so it's almost a way of mocking this Tommy Robinson guy. But I mean, I think there's probably another element to this, that maybe Tommy Robinson is just an easier British sounding name to say when you're starting up an organization. That I think there's some calculated behavior behind a lot of this as well.
Well, Stephen Yaxley-Lennon sounds a bit more like posh, maybe. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like, Tommy Robinson like does kind of conjure up this image of, a football hooligan that drinks like Stella, and it's just like a complete a-hole all the time.
Well,
whereas
that's the thing. It's hard to know where this character Tommy Robinson sort of starts and the real guy ends. It's like he's got this sort of working class, I'm the average bloke down the pub vibe going for him, but I get the feeling that that's more of a character than perhaps the real life guy. He wrote a book about how this all started, and when I saw the Muslims protesting the soldiers, that moment I realized that I was going to dedicate my life to fighting Islamization. I'm like, is that really true? It just seems kind of a sort of convenient, righteous story that probably is just a load of nonsense. And there's been a couple of interviews with him where his wife has been brought up and stuff. And he says like when he gets home, he's Stephen. His kids don't know who Tommy Robinson is. His wife keeps out of it. And then he goes to work and he becomes Tommy Robinson. I mean, it sounds like an undercover cop. It sounds like who's that guy? It sounds like a Mark Kennedy. I mean, we don't have to stretch it to that, but I think in sort of the vein of like an old Alex Jones, he knows how to go out there, present a character, cause a scene in public that sort of benefits his agenda. Whether that's really who he is, I think, is a different matter.
Well, we don't even have to go as you said, the Mark Kennedy, who was a undercover cop, under different aliases. But like you said, the Alex Jones. I mean, Alex Jones is a performance artist, Keelan. He's not that's what his lawyers have stated. In these really just nasty child custody cases. So, there does seem to be an element of that with Tommy Robinson. But let's talk a little bit about where Tommy Robinson is from. He's from Luton, which should ring some bells to some of the listeners out there because of its connection to Muhajiroun and the 7/7 bombings and some of the sort of cases that followed in the immediate aftermath of that. So explain a little bit of this, Keelan, because this is like, again, it's like of all the places that this guy is from, Luton, it's like, of course. So explain this a little. Yeah.
So Luton is this fairly small town close to London that's had a high level of immigration. It's also had a strong Islamic community. And it's always been this strange hotbed of sort of extremism when it comes to Islam. And what's interesting, as you mentioned there, Omar Bakri and Anjem Chowdhury, the leaders of Muhajiroun, which was this extremist group through the 90s. It's been rebranded like a bunch of times. During the EDL's heyday, it was called Islam for UK, and then it went on to be called Muslims Against Crusades and whatever. But they were very active in Luton during the 90s. They would give speeches. There was this sort of Islamic center where they used to congregate. They would put their stalls up in the middle of the town, pushing kind of their doctrine. And it was very much one of these Muhajiroun sort of bases of operation. But it's been pretty well established within the past decade or so that guys like Omar Bakri and a number of others were informants. They were intelligence assets. They were closely monitored by Special Branch and MI5. And the policy back then, or at least that's how this is how they've justified what happened. it was sort of like, we'll leave you alone. You can sort of, are we still there?
Yeah, we're still here, Keelan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, like, we'll leave you extremists alone. You can do all your hate preaching. You can do all your recruiting, because right now we're fighting a dirty war in the Balkans, the whole former Yugoslavia and all that mess. And what they were doing was allowing the recruiting of young Muslims based in Britain to be sent over to be trained to join the Muslims over there to fight the Serbians, to fight Milosevic in NATO's war over there. And they call it like the Covenant of Peace, the Covenant of Security, where all these sort of preachers were allowed to operate. And it's kind of the same policy that, like, sort of me and you talked about before with Libya, where we have this community of sort of Libyan refugees, dissidents. We'll turn a blind eye to some of this stuff because we need you to go over there and get rid of Gaddafi. So Tommy Robinson sort of grew up in that community where he probably saw this outward face of extremism, while those very extremists were to some degree in cahoots with the security state for sort of foreign policy reasons. Yeah, so that's kind of one aspect of it. And on his side of it, he came up through the football hooligan scene, or at least he was around those kind of people. His uncle was involved in all of that. And in this country, the football hooligan scene, you know, it's very well organized. They have their established firms, like sort of gangs. They've got ranks. They go to war with each other. They have uniforms with the clothing brands that they have and stuff. And it's always overlapped with the far right political groups. You know, so the far right kind of takes advantage of that. You have a bunch of organized, angry young men who have this sort of warlike mentality, who can get themselves organized on the streets. So you can sort of supplant that into political action. And the far right has sort of always took advantage of that with the British National Party in the 80s and 90s, who were actually, you know, blatantly ethno-nationalist, Holocaust deniers, that kind of thing. And Tommy Robinson was a briefly for a year or so a member of the British National Party before he went off to create the EDL. But just as the sort of extremist Islam side of this had informants and they were appeased and so on, there is kind of a fairly established view that the far right was teeming with police informants and spies and stuff. So, I mean, you kind of have this thing where there's two groups opposed to each other, and, you know, like maybe, I don't know, 20% of them are informants and spies, and they're just going off against each other. It's like, is this even genuine? But yeah, if you've got it, if you want to chime in there.
Oh, yeah, well, I was just going to completely agree with you, how much of this is just sort of manufactured. And this is the same case here in the U.S., both with, extremist Islamic groups, but also the far right and the far left, where you get all sorts of FBI and police informants that are inserted. I mean, definitely within the entire, right, like the white power movement in America has been completely infiltrated, to the point where it's almost like, I mean, this is just like an extension of the federal government. In what they do and say, and which makes you really wonder what the hell is the federal government's ultimate plan with some of these groups and individuals. But yeah, I mean, it should at least raise the question, like how much does Tommy Robinson really know about this? You know, if he's supposed to be this smart, intelligent guy who's the only one out there who's fighting against the Muslim rape gangs, and, you know, it's him against the world. Is he aware that there are probably tons of informants around him, or that, you know, he was part of a group or groups that had informants? Is that even, you know, again, is that sort of like whatever, you know, look the other way? Those are the good cops that we're working with or something. But it also just sort of makes you wonder, especially like in a place like Luton, where like Muhajiroun is like so over the top that, it begs the question. I mean, is this all being puppeteered by some other force in order to create tension? Which clearly they have, and certainly groups like the EDL will use groups like Al-Muhajiroun as like a poster boy for, they really are trying to bring in Sharia law, because they al-Bakri and others, I mean, they had such an insane interpretation of Islam, and they preached it as loud as they possibly could, that, they really did make, they made it seem like these guys are actually full on nuts, and we have to do something about them. And then you have the rise of the EDL. And, Keelan, quickly explain a little bit of some of the background behind the EDL, because not only is their sort of creation very interesting, they're not this working class soccer hooligan, grassroots organization. They actually come from money. And also the sort of the bizarre, you mentioned this earlier, and I agree with you, the term Nazi is being thrown around a little bit too kind of flippantly, because the EDL are definitely not Nazis, because they're extremely pro-Israel. And you could even make the case that they're like, Christian Zionists. So explain a little bit about the founding of the EDL, and particularly Alan Ayling, a.k.a. Alan Lake.
Yeah, that's an aspect of this that the mainstream media fail to really grasp, or they don't really seem to go there. But so Tommy Robinson spends a little time in the British National Party, which is definitely considered, neo-Nazi-ish. They're, Holocaust denying, that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden he comes out with his own group, the English Defence League, which is kind of an interesting name, but it wasn't born really out of the kind of football hooligan groups. It wasn't just some lads in the pub that decided, let's start this group. Its founding meeting was in some swanky London apartment with this rich Jewish business guy called Alan Lake or called Alan Ayling. Again, more strange fake names going on. But that guy wrote quite openly at the time that, look, we're going to use these football lads. We're going to use them as the muscle in our sort of bigger political agenda. They might not really know what's going on here, but, they like to have a scrap. They're pretty happy to go out with some Muslims, so we're going to use them. And he was some of the money behind this, and there were ties to a lady called Pamela Geller in the United States, who has her own kind of anti-Islam group and all that kind of thing. And the mainstream media have kind of overlooked this sort of Jewish element behind the EDL. They just lump it in with the same kind of progression from the BNP when it's not really that. Tommy Robinson's openly pledged his support for Israel. EDL marches have had the Israeli flag. There was a Jewish Defence League sort of division, but no one really sort of goes there. I'm not really sure why. I think mostly it's just ignorance. The mainstream. It's always superficial, no matter what they do. Even this whole Tommy Robinson ordeal, half the articles are just, Meghan Markle's sister tweeted support for Tommy Robinson. Look how crazy this is. And it's like, well, okay, but,
Is that true?
Oh, no, that actually happened, but...
Okay.
Yeah, Meghan Markle kind of has these, like, half-sisters and relatives that the royals kind of sneer at. I think it was... Her cousin wasn't invited to the wedding, but he came over anyway. Okay. And he brought a knife because Trump says London, you'll get knifed in London. So he brought a knife and got kicked out of a nightclub in London. I'm surprised he didn't get banged up for that. Somehow he got out of it, but he's just like, no, it's not my fault. Trump said, London's a hellhole, so I brought a knife. Like, Jesus. Right,
exactly.
But yeah, like the media, they just it's hit. So, there's this weird story about Tommy Robinson. Let's cover that in every angle that we can. We won't go into any depth, but there you go. So, yeah.
Well, there's also like the EDL had not only like a Jewish division, but a Sikh division. They had an LGBT division at one point. They had a like Pakistani Christian division. And there's a great article that you link up to in the webcast that you did for wideshut.co.uk, and we'll link up to that as well. That sort of outlines some of this stuff. But at one point, the EDL portrayed themselves as like a multicultural organization. They're just opposed to the evil Muslims, and that seems to be like such a bizarre uniting factor amongst so many. Right-wing groups. I don't think there's any, that moniker applies to the EDL, but it's like such strange bedfellows. I mean, there was like a radical rabbi that used to go to EDL rallies and give speeches. As you said, I mean, there's like like Tommy Robinson and all of the people from the rebel media, they went to Israel on like a all expenses paid trip. And again, it makes sense because, Israel is, the right-wing government within Israel has become so, toxic and anti-Muslim, anti-Iranian, all of this, this kind of, rhetoric. The Palestinians are coming. But it is such a bizarre nuance to all of this. And again, it's not fully understood. So I know what you mean, Keelan, where you say like, the way, I don't think Tommy Robinson is a Nazi.
No.
He's a violent anti-Muslim, anti-Islam, activist, possible asset or agent provocateur. But yeah, it's like super, super weird. And also just, cause it's like, there's so much bizarre kind of, history with all this. Talk a little bit about the, Richard the Lionhearted, who is this mysterious figure who may actually be Alan Ayling.
Yeah, so like in the run-up to the, I can't even remember, the Norwegian Anders Breivik thing, there was this
Island.
Right, yeah, and there was this blogger who went by the alias Richard the Lionhearted, and he posted kind of all this sort of extremist doctrine online that Breivik praised, and was very much shared within EDL circles. And of course, that whole attack goes down, and the police are trying to find out who Richard the Lionhearted is, and they all pointed different fingers at each other. There was several people that were investigated, and it caused a bit of a rift within the EDL, but they never really found out who it was and who was kind of this, described as a mentor or spiritual kind of, he kind of outlined the kind of doctrine that was used. And yeah, he just kind of vanished. But also Alan Ayling has kind of vanished too. So.
But it was believed that Alan Ayling was in fact Richard the Lionheart and had some connection to Breivik, right?
Yeah, well, he was taken in for questioning. Like, it was never proven, but he was certainly suspected. And there was all sorts of, I can't remember the lady's name, but there was a lot of praising of Breivik for a little while, and
Roberta Moore.
Right, yeah, and a lot of these figures just kind of vanished, and eventually Tommy Robinson himself he does this. He reinvents himself every couple of years, because the media will latch onto something, demonize him rightly for that, and then he'll be like, well, now I'm not racist, now I'm going to start the EDL. Oh, the EDL, Breivik, and there's too many Nazis within the EDL now, so now I'm going to repackage myself as a journalist. I'm going to spend time with a think tank, and I'm going to come back.
Quilliam, right?
Right, yeah, and I'm going to come back and sort of do this all professionally now, but not really, just kind of agitates and makes these YouTube videos with this young chap called Keelan Robertson. Right.
There's oh no, I'm sorry, Keelan. No, go ahead. I keep interrupting you.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say I can't remember what the hell it is, but there is something like, didn't Quilliam come out with some bizarre report? It had something to do, I want to say, with the Manchester bombing. Or there's something, like, Quilliam is clearly some kind of MI5, I don't know, controlled think tank.
Yeah, the details have slipped my mind too, but I think they came out and pushed the narrative that Salman Abedi was definitely radicalized on the internet. And
it was something about the bomb as well, right?
Oh no, it's that so he learned to make the bomb from YouTube guides. There was some YouTube videos and all this stuff, and that told him how to do it. And you know, we've got the evidence for that, but we're not going to show you it or anything. But,
right.
So that's one.
Well, again, it's just like another red flag. He works with this think tank, which is, I mean, if it's not being run by MI5, they're certainly like getting their marching orders from MI5. That should raise more red flags. And then you said, then he reinvents himself again. Now he's a journalist. The whole thing is just sort of bizarre, and it's certainly kind of taken a life of its own. Keelan, we've got a few minutes left. Give us an idea. I mean, what is happening right now with Tommy Robinson? I mean, is he? I assume he's going to try to appeal this, but I mean, he has pled guilty to violating the sort of contempt of court. I don't know, whatever, this thing that was hanging over his head and whatnot. So explain a little bit. I mean, what's going on with Tommy Robinson right now?
So he's in prison for 13 months. I mean, he can appeal, but he's not going to get out. I mean, it's fairly clear cut what he did. Like he had a 3-month suspended sentence. And he was told expressly, don't go near any courts, don't do this again. And he goes and does it. So the 3 months is activated, and he got another 10 months for doing it again. And that's kind of the situation. His camp are being sort of deceptive and quiet about what's happening. Like, we don't know what's happening. Like, no, of course you know what's happening. He's phoning you. Like, but they benefit really from the silence of it. And I think an interesting aspect of that was Tommy's own conviction was rolled into the reporting restrictions, which I think was a dumb move because people knew about it, and it just kind of backfired. If they wanted to sort of prevent people from sort of repeating his actions and committing contempt of court and sort of running around talking about this case, that it completely backfired by trying to restrict reporting about his arrest and his trial. But it was the mainstream media that challenged that restriction and got it lifted. It wasn't his team. His team was benefiting from the silence. That's kind of one element of it.
Well, no, it just seems like yet again, and this is not to like praise the mainstream media, because neither of us are big fans of the mainstream media, and we've certainly criticized them numerous times on both of our shows. But again, this is like another example of them actually doing something that is beneficial to Tommy Robinson, and he's not going to give him or his supporters are not going to give them credit. It's like Andrew Norfolk actually doing the real journalistic legwork, and Tommy Robinson just sort of ignoring it. As you said, a lot of journalists, mainstream journalists, actually help to get these orders lifted. It's just a fascinating tale. I mean, I suspect we will probably be covering this again at some point, because it doesn't seem like this one's going away. And I mean, Keelan, there have been these huge protests in response to this in England, and I assume those are going to continue somewhat. I mean, there does seem we were talking about this just like on Twitter. Now we're at the break. Keelan Balderson of wideshut.co.uk. I highly encourage everyone to go and check out all of his work, his writing, and his webcast. Keelan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Pierce. Yeah.
Yes, I like very much.
Radio.
You're an American institution.
American Freedom Radio.
Simply Clean Foods is dedicated to providing the best quality food you can buy next to fresh from a farmer's market. Our stringent quality controls and absolute zero GMOs plus testing for heavy metals makes us unique in the storable foods market. Our line of fruits, vegetables, and meats are suitable for everyday use, and you won't have to worry about throwing away valuable groceries ever again. Take out the amount you need and reseal the package for use within the next 6 months. Simply Clean Foods' primary focus is to bring clean food to people all around the world and change the way we look at freeze-dried food in our daily cooking. Go to simplycleanfoods.net. That's www.simplycleanfoods.net today.
We all know that they're not telling us the truth. So stand up for your rights, demand the real medicine, and your right to use it and grow it. This is Rick Sensen, and you're listening to American Freedom Radio.
American Survival Wholesale is a proud sponsor of the American Freedom Radio. And when you purchase quality products from AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, you help support this program. Our quality non-GMO foods do not contain MSG, high fructose corn syrup, or heavy metals. At American Survival Wholesale, you can choose from over 8,000 quality products, including self-defense weapons, bug-out bags, and long-term storable food at wholesale prices. We also have custom food packs available, including gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegetarian packs. If we don't have it, you don't need it. American Survival Wholesale is a veteran-owned and operated company which also supports our veterans in need, and we are very active in disaster relief. If you would like to become a distributor, please email us at bugoutamerica@usa.com or call 818-720-0759. We offer free consultations to answer all your questions. Do it today while things are calm. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com.
I don't like words that hide the truth. I don't like words that conceal reality. I don't like euphemisms. And American English is loaded with euphemisms because Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth. So they invent a kind of a soft language to protect themselves from it. I'll give you an example of that. When I was a little kid, if I got sick, they wanted me to go to the hospital and see the doctor. Now they want me to go to a health maintenance organization. Smug, greedy, well-fed white people have invented a language to conceal their sins. It's as simple as that. The CIA doesn't kill anybody anymore. They neutralize people. The government doesn't lie. It engages in disinformation. Israeli murderers are called commandos. Arab commandos are called terrorists. Contra killers are called freedom fighters. Well, if crime fighters fight crime and firefighters fight fire, what do freedom fighters fight? They never mention that part of it to us, do they? Never mention that part of it.
You're listening to AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the network who perseveres in delivering intelligent debate, constructive dialogue with true independence. The freedom to broadcast the truth is not free at all. So what is American Freedom Radio worth to you? The empowering information with fun, honest and pure integrity behind it provides an example to follow. Friendships to flourish with the moral altruism that pulls no punches. The hosts sacrifice and show remarkable discipline in their duty to deliver quality radio in service to the community with strength, wisdom, and loyalty. The founders of AFR wish to thank you personally for sharing your views and insights to make the best radio and alternative media. Now it's time for you to give something back and play a vital role in the future of America. Be as generous with us as we've been with you. Click on the donate banner at AmericanFreedomRadio.com or volunteer by emailing AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Vaccine, psychotropic drugs, and artillery batteries not included.
Launch sequence initiated.
We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Control is good. 5, roger, copy. 3, 2, 1. Engage.
Prepare your mind to experience American Freedom Radio. Porkins Policy Radio, offering a unique perspective on everything: geopolitics, culture creation, the reality of the world we live in. Coming to you you live from New York City. Your host, Pierce Redmond.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to Porkins Policy Radio. I am your host, Pierce Redmond. If you are joining us here in the second hour, we are going to be speaking with Robbie Martin of MediaRoots.org. But very quickly, I just wanted to apologize that I was kind of rambling on at the end of the first hour there, and I didn't really give Keelan enough time to kind of basically, talk about what I was going to ask him. And if anyone, didn't hear because of the intro music, Keelan's website is wideshut.co.uk. It is a must, site. I highly recommend all of Keelan's writing and his webcasts and his videos too. And I think Keelan is going to be working on putting together a video talking a bit more about some of this Tommy Robinson stuff and all these bizarre connections with the EDL and Luton and other things. So we'll definitely get Keelan back on when that video is out. But we are joined again by our good friend and frequent guest on the show, Robbie Martin of MediaRoots.org. Robbie, how are you?
I'm doing great, Pierce. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, absolutely. This was such a blessing yesterday. I was at work with a pretty gnarly little hangover, and I had made a mistake in my work schedule, and then I was trying to troubleshoot that, and then trying to come up with some guests for today, and then I again, you always kind of come through at the last minute for me, and I'm excited because we're talking about something that you and I have talked about a bit before here, and recently you did an excellent episode, a solo episode of Media Roots, where you were really kind of breaking down the latest developments vis-a-vis Qanon, Q, and his very nasty breakup with Jerome Corsi. And I guess I think Q and Jerome are probably both arguing about who broke up with who first. But this is like we were talking during the commercial break there, Robbie, like that I had just kind of like stopped paying attention to the QAnon stuff.
Yeah.
But you've been following this a bit more. So explain what just happened between Q and Corsi.
Okay, well, I need to mention a few other things as well, because Corsi, the reason why he's so important in all this is because he apparently, and I didn't realize this until after this breakup, is that he apparently was the one who fleshed out the narrative about what Q actually is, or who Q is supposed to be, sort of for the general conspiracy right-leaning audience. Now, what he originally said was that he believes that Q is a cabal of military intelligence insiders, some of them current, some of them former, who believe that the deep state was dangerous in this country and that they personally recruited Donald Trump in 2014 to run for president to take down the deep state. This is what he's gone around telling people for almost a year, Jerome Corsi. Now, what's interesting about that is that Jerome Corsi also makes the wild claim that he knows this because someone from this insider cabal personally approached him and told him this plan. Which, if that's not hard enough that already sounds incredibly fantastical. But yet, Corsi, over just the last month or so, has decided that QAnon is now fake and that it is no longer a military intelligence insider group trying to stop the deep state, but that it actually is in fact a deep state psyop in and of itself. That's a pretty big reversal. Part of the reason he says that is because he believes that there is what he describes literally as, this is his quote, Marxist indoctrination happening through Q postings. He also believes that there is a virulent, this is his words again, virulent anti-Semitic strain growing among Q's followers, which is kind of a bizarre thing to say in the first place, because we have to remember we're talking about 8chan, a forum that is littered with actual neo-Nazis. So for him to all of a sudden be concerned that Q's followers are actual anti-Semitic neo-Nazis is strange, because that's what that forum has always been. So it's quite a bizarre turnaround. And then additionally, Alex Jones, of course, jumped ship from QAnon after telling his followers that it was real and that we should trust it for almost a year. And part of the reason, actually, that I've digging back through Q's posts, the reason why I found out that Alex Jones jumped ship was because someone asked Q what they thought about Alex Jones, and Q merely responded with a posting to a URL about the divorce lawsuit, saying that Alex Jones's lawyer used him being a performance artist as the defense. So that's why Alex Jones broke up with Q, is that Q directly attacked him. Q actually never directly attacked Corsi, but sort of insinuated that people like Corsi are making a lot of money off of this and aren't necessarily in the know. So that just sort of explains why they both broke up with Q. And then additionally, what happened after that, Pierce, I don't know if you've seen this recently, but after almost a year of WikiLeaks official Twitter sort of dropping breadcrumbs that Pizzagate might be real, and this is important to say, is that WikiLeaks never overtly told their followers, hey, a lot of that stuff in the Podesta emails is very devastating, damaging. However, we don't believe that Podesta or his people are involved in a child sex trafficking ring. In fact, WikiLeaks officials did the opposite and egged people on to believe that was the case by posting things from people like Cassandra Fairbanks, Jack Posobiec, who made his career off of periscoping from inside Comet Pizza. They also promoted Ben Swan's Pizzagate segment, going through all the band names like Heavy Breathing, insinuating that these bands who played at Comet Pizza might also be involved in a child sex trafficking ring. So what WikiLeaks did recently is they jumped ship also from Q, which is kind of fascinating because they never really jumped ship from Pizzagate. They never distanced themselves from Pizzagate. They did the opposite. In this case, they actually distanced themselves from Q, saying that they believe, whoever's running WikiLeaks official Twitter now says that they believe it's a LARP. And not just maybe even a LARP, but actually sort of what Jerome Corsi is now saying, that it is possibly a deep state psyop to keep people sort of loyal to Trump. And WikiLeaks official Twitter did this in the form of posting to the Twitter account of Susie Dawson and also another article by Caitlin Johnstone. Susie Dawson's Twitter thread pretty much has been saying a lot of the same things I've been saying about QAnon for the past few months. It's a pretty solid analysis, but yet none of these figures, who are all sort of joined together in this sort of almost like religious faith in WikiLeaks, have never accused WikiLeaks of helping egg this on in the first place, or being responsible for sort of pushing along and creating the framework for this narrative to thrive in the first place. Because I would make the strong argument that without Pizzagate and without WikiLeaks validating those Pizzagate theories, QAnon would have nothing to stand on. So that's sort of where we are now, is that all of a sudden all these figures who help push it along, or even passively help push it along, are now jumping ship.
And I'll just say that the official WikiLeaks Twitter account is a bizarre. I would love to know who's actually running it, because at times they seem to contradict or even attack Assange. And oddly, the official WikiLeaks Twitter account actually tweeted out a link to the American Journal of Economics and Sociology, the issue that me and Tom and Aaron and others wrote in, recommending it as reading material. So I have no freaking clue who is controlling that. But all very interesting stuff, particularly this Q more or less going directly after Corsi, going after Alex Jones, and now what is it? Alex Jones has a new source, the infamous Zach, who I don't know, Jones is now claiming that Zach was feeding them information and that he was their real source. They never really believed Q, but they confirmed a lot of Q's things because Zach, whoever the hell Zach is, told them.
Yeah.
But I mean, Robbie, what do you? The bizarre thing here, the kind of creepy thing, is that on some level and it's so funny to hear Alex Jones, Jerome Corsi, WikiLeaks, all these other, saying that, QAnon is like a deep state plot. I mean, we called that like day one.
Yeah.
If not like a deep state thing, that it was some kind of government, psyop, that it was clearly somebody trying to co-opt and control the conspiracy crowd, because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that that's exactly what an anonymous person or persons on 4chan or 8chan posting about, rounding up the I mean, it was so clearly a dog whistle to the most like rabid Trump supporters. But
yeah,
to now see them kind of like, openly attacking people like Alex Jones and Corsi. I mean, here's a question that you kind of posited on your podcast. I mean, are there now like multiple QAnon? Like is this like who is actually in control of this account or accounts? I mean, I don't know how you can like is there a way to actually see on 8chan or 4chan if it's the same person posting? Because isn't it just constantly anonymized?
Well, that's a really good question, and it took me a while to understand exactly why people trust that this is the same person posting. Apparently, there's something called a trip code, where once you develop this code, it's easy to verify, apparently, that it's the same account posting, even though it's an anonymous account, that it's the same account the whole time posting. That's something that I'm willing to believe and understand. Yeah, that's probably true. However, the other part of your question is we don't necessarily know who's using the account. I mean, obviously because it's anonymous, but we don't know how many people, if it's just one person who's using this anonymous account or if it's a group of people. So that remains to be, like, we honestly don't know. I don't think we'll ever know. But that's a possibility that this could be an account with the same trip code that's being passed around to a group of people to log into and post from. Now, another thing recently came up. You mentioned that guy Zach, who calls into Alex Jones now and claims that not just that he's the real Q, but that he sort of has the line on the same information that Q had, and that he's sort of the putting out the truthful narrative now. What's interesting, Pierce, is that right after Jerome Corsi and Alex Jones and even WikiLeaks broke up with Q, there started to surface other people who say that they have sort of the real truth and they are sort of connected to the same Q level security clearance. So we sort of saw like it branch off to several different people. There's actually a handful of Twitter accounts now that rose from, just a few hundred followers to tens of thousands of followers in a matter of weeks, claiming that they are now like the real person delivering the Q narrative. So that's very bizarre. But yet Q itself is still posting on 8chan and continues to post. And it actually didn't comment at all on WikiLeaks breaking up with it. So yeah, it continues to post. And it's now claiming that June 11th, there's going to be this giant event that's going to happen. And that's sort of where people are waiting for now, after. And one of the other things Jerome Corsi said that actually has some truth to it was that there's all these promised booms and events that Q keeps talking about that are simply just not delivered. And when I mentioned Pied Piper scenario before, I don't remember if I mentioned that off air or not, but I guess the difference between this and Pizzagate is that this is a Pied Piper situation. This is someone putting out breadcrumbs, putting out hints, and letting the engine of sort of crowdsourced investigations on 8chan and other places fill in all the blanks. So if you look at a lot of the Q postings, they're really not saying anything specific, but yet a lot of the theories you'll see on the internet about them are very specific because that's sort of the conclusions that this crowdsourced engine has come to. So that's what's interesting about it. A lot of it actually traces back to Q postings that aren't necessarily saying the things that people are saying. So It has to. I'm saying that because it has to be separated what the crowdsource side is saying and what the actual Q postings are saying. And that's not to say that anything the Q postings are saying are actually valid. In fact, some of the things the Q posters are saying are very disturbing. Like recently, portraying John Bolton as a hero. If you look up on this website, which is actually posted by Roseanne Barr, the tweet before the tweet that actually got her fired was a QAnon tweet. She tweeted to a website called qmap.pub. And on this website, they organize all of the QAnon posts in chronological order. There's over 1,000 of them. And you can organize them by tag. And when you tag John Bolton, the only 2 posts that Q made about John Bolton was portraying him as a hero who is about to clean house. And that alone should clue anybody in that this is not a truth-telling individual who's fighting the deep state, or like, even if you wanted to believe that. But what's strange is, I was talking to Jake Fox of Black Tower Radio yesterday about this subject. He personally spoke to Colonel Anthony Schaefer, and one of Anthony Schaefer's first responses was, I just out right off the bat, I'm not Q, he told Jake. And then he also said, but he does think Q is doing more good than harm and that people should follow it. And Colonel Anthony Schaefer is military intelligence. So that is a very odd thing that here we have this guy who sort of, at one time or another, was sort of part of the conspiracy narratives having to do with 9/11, saying that we should be paying attention to Q. That's just very interesting to me.
Oh, and all Schaefer does now is just go on Fox News and basically just sort of reversed all of his opinion. I mean, he doesn't talk about 9/11 anymore. He doesn't talk about Able Danger or any of this stuff or any of the questions that he at one point, brought up to some degree. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't trust Schaefer as far as you could throw him. But just here's one thing just straight off the bat that I think needs to be made apparent to people. Q level clearance refers to the Department of Energy, not anything else. Now, within that, I think because there are like parts of the U.S. Nuclear Command that are that fall under the guise of the Department of Energy, there is, it is possible that this Q clearance is referring to some military personnel, but it's the Department of Energy. That's it. Now there are, so just to keep that in mind, again, like, how does someone at the Department of Energy really know all of this stuff? Just to put it out there, because people kind of say this like, oh, well, he has Q level clear, and it's always he, right? It's not like a woman. Yeah. I think we talked about this before, but I would love if Q was like a trans Muslim, activist or something like, or soldier, something crazy like that. That would be amazing. But just to keep all of that in mind, when you're discussing this stuff. But no, I mean, Robbie, there's so many little aspects to this now. Like you said, the defending John Bolton, making him seem like some sort of a good guy. I mean, that was my initial problem. And then also it's like these there's always going to be some story that's about to break. And then the way that, like you said, a not even cryptic, I mean, just a standard post by Q that makes absolutely no sense. And then people are extrapolating like, okay, on, June 28th, this is definitely going to happen. And I talked about this last week on Chuck Ocelli's show, the way people took, again, the right-wing media like True Pundit, which is this like idiotic website which loves QAnon, and they're constantly promoted by who's that guy, Jason Goodman from the George Webb fame. They promoted the Jeffrey Epstein FBI thing. They read one line in the FBI file and said that Epstein was an informant for Mueller and he's part of the deep state. And nowhere is that even really clear from this one line that they're quoting from. But in those documents, there is like real stuff, but God forbid they ever talk about that. But it reminded me of the same thing with this Q stuff where, I mean, I'm on qmap.pub right now and I see these pictures of, they're obviously taken from within an airplane, and, but it says Air Force One, and that's just believed? I mean, why? Where is the actual proof?
Well, the bizarre part about that, Pierce, is that apparently all these crowdsourced investigators have been convinced that that's a photograph from Air Force One because of the flight path, apparently, and what it's photographing out the window. That's one frankly I'm confused on, but there seems to be thousands of people out there convinced that and this is the thing, this is what Q does. So he posted the picture. Other people from this crowdsourced sort of sector of 8chan looked at where Air Force One was stopping that day and looked at aerial maps, of the ocean or whatever, and then they were like, oh my God, this means that Q is real because this is where Trump's plane would have been. That I actually don't, I don't know if, I don't know the validity to that. I haven't looked deeply into that. It sounds ridiculous. There is, however, one other thing where I went from thinking this is a total LARP, this is just a group of 8chan pranksters, to actually now believing that this may be a dangerous narrative actually being put out by someone close to Donald Trump. But that does not mean that I think any of the things Q is actually posting are legitimate. It just means that this actually could be something close to the president, which in my mind actually makes it more dangerous and bizarre than if it was just a hoax. And one of the things that actually kind of convinced me that might be the case is someone asked Q on 8chan, maybe Q can work the phrase tip top into the State of the Union as a shout out to the board. And a few weeks later is when Trump did that weird Easter speech on the White House balcony where he said that the White House is in tippy-top shape. Some people like to call it tip-top shape. And he kind of gave a weird wink or something. It just was a you remember that speech, right?
Yes, vaguely.
Yeah. So after that moment is when everybody was like, this is 100% real. Meaning not just that they think it's close to Trump, but that everything Q is saying is also true. Now, I see a big difference between those two, because if it's something close to Trump, that means that everything that Q is saying needs to be looked at through the lens of this is some kind of Team Trump political psyop, which right. Everything has to be heavily scrutinized, and you also have to analyze what is the actual narrative they're trying to put out, and how does this benefit Trump if it is indeed something close to him. So I guess that's how I've been looking at it more recently, is that if this is, one of the most alarming conclusions I've come to is that it could be used as a fail-safe in case he is either impeached, indicted, or he loses the next election. And if you think about those three scenarios, this is a really scary situation, because it's not just Alex Jones and Pizzagate, where Alex Jones could all of a sudden tell people to take up their guns and take out the deep state. This is actually a Pied Piper situation where someone is directly able to activate, millions of potential loyal followers into doing something potentially violent. And that's a really, really frightening thing to me. And we're talking about 8chan, which is filled to the brim with actual neo-Nazi type people. And
child pornographers and all sorts of awful people. People don't really understand what 8chan and 4chan are really about. But yeah, mostly Nazis and pedophiles. But which again is so funny that Pizzagate, that whole theory forms on 4chan, which is just that's where you go to get that kind of stuff that they're supposedly exposing.
For sure.
No, yeah, Robbie, I think I'm beginning to believe what you're. I wasn't fully aware of this tippy top thing. That is pretty creepy. And I mean, no,
remember
go ahead.
We were discussing the MAGA pilled account that Trump actually retweeted a few months ago. There was nothing else on that account besides QAnon postings. I mean, it was almost like he deliberately retweeted something in a sea, retweeted something innocuous from this account. When you go to the account, every other posting was about QAnon practically. Yeah. If that's not dog whistling, I mean, that what is that? So So sorry to interrupt you. I mean, that alone tells me that this is something that Trump at the very least is trying to point people's attention towards. Same with Matt Drudge, same with Sean Hannity. Even though they haven't directly said, go look at Q, they've hinted at it several times.
No, and that's what I find more and more is that, I mean, again, we saw this during the campaign with people like Roger Stone and others, Matt Drudge certainly, but, you know, Roger Stone was able to obviously gauge the certain aspects of the conspiracy culture and use them to help prop up Trump. And certainly Roger Stone, I would say, was instrumental in certain things and events in Trump's early campaign that was all about, attracting, baiting the conspiracy crowd. But like you say, now we see it more, like with the MAGA pill retweet. Like you said, I mean, it's almost like he would have had to have gone, through all, he found the most benign tweet from this account because everything else is QAnon. So certainly, yeah, it's sending a message. The tip top thing is, I don't really know what else to make of that. Other than, I mean, it's either the strangest coincidence possible, or this is something that somebody within Trump's inner circle saw this question and said, "Say this," because this will benefit us. Or that's
a really good, I think, really good theory too. I mean, it could be that it may have nothing to do with Trump, but Trump is smart enough to be playing off of it and hinting to it. I think that's a very valid theory. But continue, sorry.
Well, no. I mean, yeah. I mean, I almost hope that's what it is. Or in a more sinister theory. I mean, this is all being controlled either by people close to Trump or by the CIA or some group like that. I mean, it's no coincidence that on this season of Homeland, Kerry uses 4chan. Clearly they are aware of this whole QAnon thing. They're commenting on that on the CIA's television show. So that should already be raising some red flags to the people out there that are still believe in this QAnon nonsense. But yeah, or it's like this is all being run by elements within the administration. And they're inserting things like the tip top and other little aspects of this into Trump's speech and stuff like that. I mean, the thing that's really crazy is just like you said, is how easily manipulated so many of these people are. I mean, because would they? I don't think they would really care if it was revealed that QAnon was actually, Donald Trump himself, or just that it was someone within the Trump administration, without Q level clearance. I don't think they would really care. It wouldn't actually matter. Or at the very least, like you said, they can be activated into doing something. Because so many of them seem so committed to this idea. And if like you said, if Trump gets indicted or impeached or he loses the election, which seems plausible, they're going to go just insane over this. They're going to completely lose it. And that is just so bizarre. And shows you how far the conspiracy culture has come, from the heady days of 9/11 truth to some anonymous person posting on a neo-Nazi child porn forum can have this much influence over people. I mean, like we've said this before. I don't really want to spend any more time on him, but like Lionel was someone that I actually liked. I didn't agree with him on stuff, but I thought he was intelligent. And now, I mean, it's like he's either a full-blown lunatic or he's just in it for the money. It's all about the clicks. I mean, to see someone like that be so sucked in and talking about the he's always praising the decoders out there. I mean, they're decoding nothing. I mean, some of these like lines are just so vague or just BS. I mean, I don't know what they think they're decoding. And then, it's interesting too, Robbie, and you'd probably know this better than I, but, there's no arguments on 8chan about interpretations, right? It's like, it just sort of is like, this is what it means. Everyone just kind of goes with it. I would love to know who are those people that kind of are let me, decode this for you. Now we all believe this.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because apparently there are a lot of people on these forums who don't believe it, but they're not the ones out there posting about it on blogs or making YouTube videos about it. So the overwhelming majority of people who are actually, doing reports about it are full believers. So I feel like even if there is a contingent of 8chaners and people who think this is a LARP or whatever, they're just simply buried in terms of like their voice. You don't really hear their voices because, a lot of those people probably don't have the impetus to make YouTube videos. Let's just also, be honest about this, that, someone like Lionel, like you said, this is straight up clickbait. He knows that if he talks about QAnon, people are thirsty. This is a reptilian brain, amygdala sort of hits the part of your brain which is very emotional. You're hoping that the storm is coming. He's about to round up all these people. It's a very faith-driven, wish fulfillment narrative. And if you put out videos sort of telling people this wish is going to come true, come listen to me talk about it, that's a very emotional form of clickbait, really. It's borderline rapture-esque. If we're talking about evangelical preachers, it has a similar flavor to it, that the end times are coming. There's going to be this big sea change coming. God is going to come down. It's a similar flavor to me. And it really is unfortunate that people like him are so easily sucked into this, because he's not a total idiot. I mean, that's what's so fascinating to me, is someone like him is actually very educated. I mean, he prides himself on having this gigantic vocabulary, this intellect, but yet someone like him can get fully sucked down into this rabbit hole of QAnon. And I think that really shows how powerful it is. I mean, if someone like him could go fully into it. So I don't think you're piling it on him too much. I think, it's like he's a perfect illustration of how this can tip someone like him into going down this rabbit hole. We already don't expect Alex Jones to hold down the fort and have principles. We don't expect Jerome Corsi to, but someone like Lionel's a little different, because we've sort of seen him come from a more principled, truthful place to this. So it's like, wow, how does this happen? How does it happen where you can trust a narrative, even if it's telling you things you want to hear about that are tapping into certain conspiracy narratives you believe in? If it's saying that John Bolton is a hero, if it's saying that Eric Prince should be trusted because he knows where the bodies are buried, that somehow because he was involved. I mean, the insinuation that QAnon puts out about Eric Prince is very fascinating, because it's like whoever's posting this is playing off of the idea that people don't trust Eric Prince. Even though the right-wing alt-right media has been doing their best to try to prop up Eric Prince as this anti-establishment hero, people like Cassandra Fairbanks, Jack Posobiec, Gateway Pundit, these horrible, manipulative, dishonest outlets that put out blatantly racist hoax stories about Muslims that I've actually covered. In one instance, Jim Hoff, the person who ran the Gateway Pundit, had a sock puppet account that he would just use to put out radically untrue claims about things he witnessed Muslims doing. So I blew that open. I wrote a blog post about it. But yet the QAnon person understands that a lot of these 8chaners are skeptical of Eric Prince still, even with these best efforts of these alt-right charlatans trying to rebrand him. So what QAnon has done is spun a slightly different narrative, saying that no, I understand why you guys are skeptical of Prince, but yet he knows where the bodies are buried because he was so involved in all these sort of war crimes that took place that's why he's an ally. And also what's interesting is they're saying the same thing about Rudy Giuliani, yet while not specifically mentioning why Rudy Giuliani might know where the bodies are buried. Sort of not, maybe almost insinuating, dropping a breadcrumb about 9/11, but not saying anything about 9/11. So that's the bizarre thing about it too, is it seems to be savvy enough to know how to navigate around sort of the skepticism that some of these 8chaners have, and to sort of keep carving this. And I would argue that it's almost carving its sort of own unique path now. It's not completely lockstep with Jerome Corsi. It's not lockstep with Alex Jones anymore. It's not lockstep with George Webb and that sort of weird, Awan brothers, Debbie Wasserman Schultz is the keys to unlock the deep state of everything kind of crap. It's not that. So it's kind of diverging into its own unique narrative now, but it has heavy evangelical flavor to it, because QAnon will also post full Bible passages and say things like America. So that's what at first made me think that this did have some kind of relationship to Alex Jones and Jerome Corsi, because they are the two most popular sort of outcroppings of what I would describe as more of the evangelical flavored right-wing conspiracy movement.
No, I was just going to say that, Robbie, that the thing that just made me kind of like do a double take with some of the QAnon stuff were these strange apocalyptic Bible passages. And again, you see a lot of these like 8chaners and other Twitter accounts and stuff that will repeat QAnon stuff, will also repeat all of these like biblical passages and Psalms and stuff about end times, which is, I mean, fine, do you, but it's a bit scary when you're sort of mixing in this evangelical fervor about, God coming and judging, the sinners and the unbelievers with, again, equating it with a human-like figure like Q or Trump. Again, I mean, it's like they're almost giving these godlike powers to humans, to regular individuals, which is just like a really scary sort of a thought. And again, when you have that kind of fervor behind you, well, you can be convinced of anything. I mean, this is how they indoctrinate and brainwash young Muslim men to strap bombs on themselves or to fly planes into buildings. Again, I mean, it's just like it's all right there. And this is, I'll just sort of briefly mention, I mean, that kind of dovetails with what we were talking about in the first hour with Keelan Balderson about, the English Defense League and Muhajiroun and, government infiltration of both these groups. And it's just, we forgot to mention it, but Q is also the name of some sort of like asset informant that pops up in the 7/7 bombing and in the this sort of made up fertilizer bomb plot, which happened just after 7/7 in Luton again, and was sort of connected in with all of this to kind of reinforce it. So just as throwing it out there, there's another Q out there who's some sort of supposedly like a Muslim MI5 informant, deep stater. So I just just a bizarre coincidence or something like that. But no, the evangelical side to this, Robbie, is super weird and bizarre. And because you just brought up Rudy Giuliani there, and maybe we can just kind of go off on him a little bit. But it's funny, you mentioned that they kind of drop a hint like Rudy Giuliani knows. Now that has to be in reference to 9/11. But they, I had John Gold on recently, and we were both remarking that nobody in the conspiracy culture anymore, the mainstream, this QAnon, they never talk about 9/11. It's like it didn't exist, Yeah. Or it was real. It was just a bunch of pissed off, angry Muslims that flew planes in. And the Rudy Giuliani stuff is so fascinating because he's so intimately involved in all of it. I mean, he is the true face of the deep state in that he's he's a mayor that was connected into this huge giant web with so many different, players and companies and events and stuff. That's like the deep state. When you're talking about like a mayor who owned a company that was helping with, it is connected to the anthrax stuff, and he's getting rid of all the evidence. And
his law firm his law firm had as a client Manuel Noriega, which he still denies to this day. He tries to distance himself from that claim. So his history with this so-called deep state goes back quite a bit.
Oh yeah, well there was that crazy radical jihadi preacher that was connected to Giuliani. Money changing hands between the two of them. And like
his relationship with MEK is something that you probably mentioned.
Totally, yes, a terrorist cult which worked with the Ayatollah until the Ayatollah thought they were too insane, and then they went and worked for Saddam to help gas the Kurds, and then even Saddam thought that they were kind of nuts, and then the U.S. and the CIA absorbed the MEK. And this Giuliani bows in front of Maryam Rajavi, this brutal cult leader who runs the MEK, who probably killed her husband or has him locked away somewhere. Who's another nut job, but just as a point of order, Giuliani is I don't know. I mean, Robbie, you know more about him than I do, but what do you make of his like recent outbursts or some of Giuliani's comments, like this weird one? Which I couldn't even believe he said this, that Trump could have killed Comey like in the Oval Office and gotten away with it. I mean, what the hell is he? He's either on something, like he really is like a psychotic cokehead, which was my theory during the RNC when Giuliani came out and was just screaming, or he really is just like, he's as senile and doddering as Trump is.
It's really strange, Pierce. I don't know what to make of Rudy Giuliani being the face of Trump's new legal defense strategy. It seems incredibly sloppy. It seems like all Rudy Giuliani is doing is generating more heat towards Trump. So I honestly don't know what to make of it. And it is quite strange to me. I mean, and I've already written about how troubling it is that Trump surrounded himself with so many people who have sort of these, in my opinion, very disturbing connections to the 2001 anthrax attacks and the subsequent cover-up. I mean, it's not just Giuliani, who actually had a company called Bio1 that was hired to clean the Florida Sun building. It was also Mike Pence, who continued to claim that Saddam Hussein sent anthrax to the mail even after Ari Fleischer and the Bush administration denied it for several years. We have James Woolsey, who was advising the Trump campaign, who was instrumental in organizing Operation Dark Winter, starring Judith Miller and others, which was a bioterror drill simulating a smallpox terrorist attack on the country, which ends with a fake newscast, a line of dialogue saying that the next attack will be anthrax, sent by terrorists from Afghanistan, where they got it from Iraq. And this was a bioterror drill that was done in June of 2001. So I didn't mean to get too much off on a tangent, but I mean, it would be interesting if Q started dropping, more specific things like that. But yet I don't see anybody in conspiracy world or even, conspiracy fact world trying to tie together any of these narratives. I mean, I feel like I'm one of the only people out there who's actually, lumped together these connections and tried to show them to people and be like, there's a pattern here that's very disturbing. And it's not just that these are neocon outliers like John Bolton, who's like more crazy than most neocons. There's something here that I find frankly disturbing. And then it also gets even weirder when you think that Robert Mueller, the guy who's after Trump right now, was also instrumental in covering up the 2001 anthrax attacks. And I know that
and 9/11.
Well, and 9/11. And I know that, this is something I've been heavily invested in for years, so people can say that I see everything through the lens of these anthrax attacks. But I don't think you can write these connections off. They're too, I just think they're too coincidental. And I honestly don't know what that means. I mean, I guess the worst case scenario will be that Trump is crazy enough to try his own kind of false flag terrorist attack. I wouldn't discount that as a possibility. I mean, it's actually funny because a lot of people on the resistance side, before Russia became the number one talking point, were also saying the same thing. Like even Thomas Friedman said that he's worried Trump will do his own 9/11. Honestly, to me, that's possible. Like, I don't put anything past Trump. I think that he's insane. And I think that people like Rudy Giuliani and John Bolton are extremely dangerous people who are connected to the deep state. And I wouldn't put anything past these people. So that's what's ultimately so dangerous about QAnon trying to tell us that these people are heroes and we should, quote unquote, trust the plan. Trust the plan. Don't worry if John Bolton's a neocon. Don't worry if, Eric Prince, is a horrible war criminal. He knows where the bodies are buried. There's all these sort of things that deflect away from those things. So I think it's very dangerous because we should really keep even if you're in conspiracy world, you should keep your eye on the ball and be genuinely concerned about who these people are in charge.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think your point there, Robbie, about making people like a Giuliani or Bolton seem like they're trustworthy or something is like totally just sort of setting up some larger thing. Now, that's not to say that it's going to be like another 9/11, but I think it's just it's in order to make these crooks and criminals and certainly card-carrying members of the artists formerly known as the Deep State. It normalizes them. It makes them seem okay. It makes them seem trustworthy. So then it's like when they're actually covering up something, nobody will really bat an eye, except for people like you or me and a few others. The Giuliani stuff is just really unfathomable because he's just such like you said, I don't know what he's actually bringing to the table. All he does is generate more headlines that are insane. I mean, maybe that's their strategy is like just put it all on Rudy. But then, Trump goes on, every morning, these like Twitter tirades, talking about witch hunts. And I mean, he brings up the Russia stuff more than the Democrats do at this point. I mean, it seems like that whole thing it's going to be resolved. Nothing is really going to happen. I mean, it's like, if anything, there's way more having to do with Trump's connections to like the UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. That's where the real dirt is, not Russia. So, and they're not going to go after a bunch of allies. But the Russia thing seems like it's going to end. I don't know why him and Rudy seem to bring it up more and more. Unless they really are just both a bunch of senile, doddering old men who don't know what, they can't be helped. I don't know. I'm not sure what they're going to get out of this, but the whole thing is super bizarre, Robbie.
It is. I mean, the only thing I can think of, Pierce, that they might get out of it, and this is, this is a scenario that I haven't really even heard many people in the resistance talking about anymore, although they used to, where Trump might be setting up some kind of more authoritarian move that he hasn't tried so far, and. I hate to go into some more hyperbolic scenarios, but let's just say he is indicted, or let's just say he's subpoenaed, and he refuses to appear. What happens then? I mean, honestly, like what happens? Let's just say they do that kind of standoff. Where do we go from there? Do armed federal agents need to come to the White House?
Yeah, what if the Secret Service do?
And what if Trump is indicted and he refuses to leave the White House? I mean, that's a really interesting scenario to ponder because what Trump has set up is this sort of martyrdom complex, witch hunt with QAnon, all this other stuff. Let's just assume that QAnon is somehow an operation he's running. It's all sort of set up to be a fail-safe in case something really bad affects him where he has to go down. So that's what I worry about is maybe Trump and Rudy's strategy is to really sort of put their stakes in the ground and be like, look, even if he's indicted, he can pardon himself. Even if he's subpoenaed, he's not going to go to the subpoena. It's almost like they're setting up what I could almost see as an authoritarian move of some kind. And if that's what they're doing, it's a very crazy gamble. I mean, I honestly don't know. I mean, that could be one play, that Trump is trying to make. It's a very risky and very crazy play to make. So I don't know. I wouldn't put anything past him.
That's an interesting idea. Setting it up for some sort of authoritarian power grab or move or something. And maybe that's why Rudy Giuliani went to such an extreme, Donald Trump could shoot Comey and get away with it. It's sort of like because that is as extreme as you can possibly get. Yeah. So that, maybe that's just to sort of ease us into if he gets subpoenaed, he's not going to show up, or if he's indicted, he's going to barricade himself in the White House. I don't know. But you do wonder if that's maybe that's what that play is just going just up to the moment of like shooting the head of the FBI, but not. It's like, well, but so we can look back that, well, at least he didn't shoot Comey, right? I mean, Rudy did, he did promise us that. It's just mind-boggling. But it does kind of make you, and that's what I find so interesting, like, with so much of the Trump MAGA people, is that it's like all like kind of like self-projection. Like, there is a storm coming. There might actually be something, but I think it really has to do with themselves. Like, it has to do with Trump. Like, that might actually be the real threat. You know what I mean? It's like with the Pizzagate stuff and all that other, it's like, it's all projection. It's like Donald Trump and Epstein were best friends. End of story. Like, he has surrounded himself with other people connected to that case, like Acosta.
Yeah.
So it's all about like it's like projection. So maybe there is a storm coming, and Q is just sort of prepping. Because I mean, you've talked about this before, Robbie, but like the way QAnon talking about martial law being a good thing.
Well, yeah, that was one of the. I'll mention that post again in case anyone didn't hear our last discussion on this, but that was one of the most disturbing posts of all. Was that it was basically, and I don't have it up in front of me now, but Q, if you look at this website, qmap.pub, you can find it, where basically Q is saying that temporary military control will be necessary to prevent the deep state from stopping Trump from rounding up all the elite pedos. And that was something that was sort of framed as this will be a good thing. And that's kind of what made me think, oh my God, this is a LARP to troll Alex Jones fans into embracing martial law. How hilarious is that? But yet I was also frightened by that, thinking, well, that's a really crazy thing to get these people to embrace martial law because Trump is in charge of it. But yet now that I, think it might actually be coming from Trump's own people, it puts an even more disturbing spin on it. That let's say that Trump does have sort of the loyalty of the military, and he loses the loyalty of any other branch of government. I mean, and he tries to use it to maintain power. I mean, I know these sound like very hyperbolic scenarios, but I would not put anything past him. And crazier things have happened in this world. So, I don't know. And the scary thing is that will, I mean, to talk about divide, the country's divided. I mean, imagine what would happen. Even if you remove QAnon from the equation completely, there's still plenty of energy out there, plenty of people out there who will feel like, they might actually march to DC to help Trump stay in power with armed, armed militia resistance. I mean, we already saw Adam Kokesh try to do that bizarre stunt where he tried to bring people to D.C. with loaded guns. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
Cocked a shotgun. I mean, that seemed like a straight up psyop to me. I don't know what the hell that was about.
Well, didn't he get arrested for that too?
He did, yeah. But I mean, I don't know, man. It's there's a lot of scary things that Trump could still do if he decides to go for the really crazy plays here. I mean, I think, I talk all the time about people underestimating Alex Jones and InfoWars and the power they have, but don't underestimate Trump's dirty tricks, I mean, you're talking about the guy who was mentored by Roy Cohn and Roger Stone. I mean, Roger Stone is a total psychopath. I mean, he just had a falling out with Randy Credico saying that he made it like a death threat at him because Randy and him got into it because Roger Stone was sort of trying to imply that Randy was the one who gave him the connection to Julian Assange. And Randy was like, no, wait a second. Now you're sort of throwing me under the bus, and then all of a sudden Roger Stone just straight up death threats towards him. I mean, so
really?
Oh yeah.
Well, we are at the break. Great place to end it. Thank you so much, Robbie, for joining us. You can find all of Robbie's work at MediaRoots.org, and you can follow Robbie on Twitter and also averyheavyagenda.com. Thank you all so much for listening, and I will be talking to you all very soon.
rules. No rules. No taboo topics. No taboo topics. No fear of doom. No fear of doom. We are American Freedom Radio. American Freedom Radio.
Simply Clean Foods is dedicated to providing the best quality food you can buy next to fresh from a farmer's market. Our stringent quality controls and absolute zero GMOs plus testing for heavy metals makes us unique in the storable foods market. Our line of fruits, vegetables, and meats are suitable for everyday use, and you won't have to worry about throwing away valuable groceries ever again. Take out the amount you need and reseal the package for use within the next 6 months. Simply Clean Foods' primary focus is to bring clean food to people all around the world and change the way we look at freeze-dried food in our daily cooking. Go to simplycleanfoods.net. That's www.simplycleanfoods.net today.
This is Rick Simpson, and you're listening to American Freedom Radio.
American Survival Wholesale is a proud sponsor of the American Freedom Radio. And when you purchase quality products from AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com, you help support this program. Our quality non-GMO foods do not contain MSG, high fructose corn syrup, or heavy metals. At American Survival Wholesale, you can choose from over 8,000 quality products, including self-defense weapons, bug-out bags, and long-term storable food at wholesale prices. We also have custom food packs available, including gluten-free, dairy-free, and vegetarian packs. If we don't have it, you don't need it. American Survival Wholesale is a veteran-owned and operated company which also supports our veterans in need, and we are very active in disaster relief. If you would like to become a distributor, please email us at bugoutamerica@usa.com or call 818-720-0759. We offer free consultations to answer all your questions. Do it today while things are calm. That's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com.
Assassination. You know what's interesting about assassination? Well, not only does it change those popularity polls in a big hurry, but it's also interesting to notice who it is we assassinate. You ever notice who it is? Stop to think of who it is we kill. It's always people who've told us to live together in harmony and try to love one another. Jesus, Gandhi, Lincoln, John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, John Lennon. They all said, try to live together peacefully. Bam! Right in the head. Apparently, we're not ready for that. Yeah, that's difficult behavior for us. We're too busy sitting around trying to think up ways to kill each other. Here's one we came up with. It's efficient, too. Genocide, you know? Killing large numbers of people simply because they don't look like you, they don't talk like you, and they don't have the same kind of hats you do. You ever notice that anytime you see two groups of people who really hate each other, chances are good they're wearing different kind of hats. Keep an eye on that. It might be important.
You're listening to AmericanFreedomRadio.com, the network who perseveres in delivering intelligent debate, constructive dialogue with true independence. The freedom to broadcast the truth is not free at all. So what is American Freedom Radio worth to you? The empowering information with fun, honest and pure integrity behind it provides an example to follow, friendships to flourish, with the moral altruism that pulls no punches. The hosts sacrifice and show remarkable discipline in their duty to deliver quality radio in service to the community with strength, wisdom, and loyalty. The founders of AFR wish to thank you personally for sharing your views and insights to make the best radio and alternative media. Now it's time for you to give something back and play a vital role in the future of America. Be as generous with us as we've been with you. Click on the donate banner at AmericanFreedomRadio.com or volunteer by emailing AmericanFreedomRadio@ymail.com. Vaccine, psychotropic drugs, and artillery batteries not included.
Launch sequence initiated.
We're now in the approach phase. Everything looking good. Control 0 out. Control is good. 5. Roger, copy. 3. 2. 1. Okay.
Prepare your mind to experience American Freedom Radio.